afternoon! Hey there everyone, it's Vampire Preacher. I'm here with yet another Marvel Legends Wave unboxing. Last week we got a request for the new Apocalypse Wave unboxing, so that's what we're going to be doing today. We've got more coming up, so at the end of the stream, let me know what you're looking forward to. I'll let you know what we've got in store. In the meantime, there is a new Apocalypse that has been released. The last time we saw Apocalypse was back in the Hasbro days. He was released as the second ever Build-A-Figure right after Galactus. He's one of the few Build-A-Figures I did not complete. I only have the main torso and lower torso for him, but none of the dangly bits like arms or legs. So, for this one, we actually have the entire wave, and we're going to be assembling all of Apocalypse. He will, of course, as always, be the final review that we do at the end of the stream, as we do every time. In the meantime, let's get into it. We've got 2, 4, 6, 7 unique figures, not including Apocalypse, to be reviewing today. Now, I do say 7 unique because there is one that we've got 2 of. I'll explain that when we get to it. In the meantime, let us begin. So, the first figure in the new wave is Gladiator. Now, many of you might not remember Gladiator. Gladiator was best known in the 90s cartoon from X-Men that was on Saturday mornings on Fox. He is incredibly powerful, can punch through planets, all that kind of fun stuff. He's one of the most powerful people in all of Marvel. As we see, he's got the window frame box and the blurb on the back, as we always have. Now, let's unbox him real quick and see what's inside the package. Now, I will warn you, of the figures that we're going to be doing today, he probably has the least amount of accessories. Inside the packaging, we've got just what you'd expect. Gladiator with the head of Apocalypse. And we're going to pop out that head to be used later on. Now, besides that, it's just Gladiator wearing his cape. That's it. Nothing really different and unique with that, just the figure with his cape. But, after the struggle of getting him out of the packaging, we see that he's put on the Hyperion buck, as we've come to expect with figures of his size, much like Venom was last week. The main giveaway is the 2 holds up here, the exact same ones that we saw with Venom in the Monster Venom wave last week. Now, he does have a peg for his cape, so that stays on nice and tight, so you don't have any issues with that getting lost, misplaced, or with it just deciding to fall off, especially if you do him in a flight pattern in a display. And the key thing is being able to get the peg back in, which is apparently a lot harder than I thought. Something about square pegs and round holes here. Kind of wish they made the peg out of a harder material than the rest of the very soft plastic they used for the cape. We'll worry about that later. In the meantime, from what we can see with the articulation on Gladiator, he looks to have the standard Hyperion buck articulation, so we're going to have elbows, or shoulders rather, that can go actually surprisingly far. Much farther than I expected them to. He's definitely got more articulation than Venom did in this regard. Huh. That is the highest up I can get them, which is well above 90 degrees. Well done, Hasbro. I'm actually very impressed. Oh, apparently my mic is a little bit low, so we're going to turn this up a little bit, see if we can get a little bit more volume out of me. As I was saying, we've got some great range of motion in the shoulders here. Additionally, we do have the bicep swivels, as we normally see. We do have the double jointed elbows, as we see on all the male figures. We'll get to that later on. But that's all that you're getting out of his bicep. He's just too swole to make it go any further. This only goes so far, but it's not bad. He does not have any extra hands, so you're not going to get him getting into a grip, like a fist fight type of like grapple pose with someone like Colossus or even Juggernaut. He can only punch things. His articulation for his wrists is a wrist swivel, and the in and out of the wrist, as we normally see. We do not have a forearm swivel on him, so it's a little bit of a cop-out on some range of articulation there. For his head, he can look all the way down, and actually decently far up, since the cape is made of such a soft rubber that I can't even get it back into its peg, but it's made of such a soft rubber that it's not really imposing and impeding his ability to look up at all. And you can get him in some great flight poses, which for a character like Gladiator is actually a really great thing. For his ab crunch, let's see how he stacks up. Oh! A surprising forward range of motion. For the back, we've got a decent range of motion in the back. Not fantastic, but decent. He does, of course, have the standard hip cut for the hip swivel. For his thighs, let's see what we're doing as far as his hips go. Can he? Will he? He will. That is some decent articulation in his hips. That makes me very pleased. His thigh swivel is a little bit higher than we're used to seeing, but that's actually a good thing. It's up here instead of being lower mid-thigh. So that's actually a very welcome change. We once again have the double jointed knees. But again, he's just too swole to make him go that far. His knees are just a little bit, or his calves rather, are a little bit too thick for him to get all the way back. Up front, we've got a calf swivel here for the boot cut. It looks like we've got the traditional ankle rockers, which have a decent range of motion. Actually, a great range of motion going outward. Going forward, he's got a slight range of motion forward. Nothing fantastic, but not bad. He can get a decent lunge in. And going back, he can go almost on point. So again, you're going to get some really nice flight stand patterns out of him if you're going to have him flying at someone. I wouldn't suggest having him grapple with someone, unless it's, of course, his own inner demons. Haha, just a joke. But he's going to be more of a flight stand character when you display him. I do not suggest attempting to take out the cape, as I still cannot get it back in due to how gummy this plastic is. It is just not going. That will be a project for later on for me before I display him, since it feels like this plastic is just, it is just barely hanging on. It seems like I finally did get it in to get him properly situated, but it's a decent figure. It's definitely using the Hyperion buck. It is making me hope that we're going to, especially since we've got the unique head sculpt with the mohawk here, it's making me hope for an OMAC figure in the future. For right now, though, he's not bad. I feel like they could have given him some of the energy particle effects that they give some of the other galactic heroes. I think those would have worked very well for him. Maybe an extra set of hands. Something more than just the head of Apocalypse. But as far as the figure goes, he's not awful. He's alright. He's okay. On to our next figure. I'm going to get him out of the way for the fans out there, since I am not one of them. I am not a fan of this particular character. I know that makes me an outlier, but fight me. Our next character is Wolverine. We have the traditional yellow and blue spandex tiger stripe outfit. Once again, it's got the panel front, the blurb on the back with the promotional photo. And once we get inside, there's good things to talk about, or so I've heard. On the inside, we have Wolverine, an extra set of hands, and the set of cables for Apocalypse for his arms. We're going to put those cables to the side. Now, before we get into Wolverine, the cables themselves are just rubbery, gummy plastic. They are not bendable wires. I know we'd have liked to have seen that, especially since they did do bendable wires for Mr. Fantastic's hands when they released him for the Walgreens release. It would be great if we did see some more bendable wires, especially in the form of these tentacles, Doc Ock's tentacles. And we shall see with Omega Red later today. I suppose a minor spoiler alert is in order for that. Getting him out of the packaging, Wolverine feels great in hand. Wow. I'm actually very impressed at this figure. I might not be the biggest fan of the old Canicle head, but I can recognize a decent sculpt when I see it. And this is one of those. He's got some great detailing on him. Actually, if you look closely, if you look very closely at his arms here, you can actually see they sculpted on the arm hair for the Canicle head's hairy arms, and they sculpted his muscles incredibly well. Agreed, 90s version, best version, and this one is based off the 90s Jim Lee version, the one from the Saturday morning cartoon. So he already goes really well with Gladiator, along with one of the other characters that we will see later on in this very wave. Thank you for the follow! And welcome to the stream! Examining the figure's articulation, we've got a decent amount of forward movement in his head. It's not looking great, but it's looking alright. Looking down, not that he's got much to look down at, we've got a decent amount of articulation there as well. Now, something that I do love that they did include with this figure are the butterfly joints. And that really does make the figure. Those are really, really helpful. Sorry, I'm really impressed with the Wolverine figure. That's not something I would normally say. But he gets that great berserker rage look to him this way. With just a simple movement of these butterfly joints back, you can really get him to look like he's about to go lunging at you. I kind of love that. I'd love if they had the butterfly joints in more of their figures, as he's got some great forward articulation with it as well. Additionally, he does have our normal shoulders. Because of his armor plating, he's only going to get to about 90 degrees. Actually, a little bit under. He's not getting a great degree upwards here, but he does get a great degree forward and back. He once again has a bicep swivel up here, which actually doesn't impede on the sculpt, surprisingly enough. He's got the double jointed elbows. Not that that matters. Look at that articulation. That is all we're getting. Out of a double jointed elbow, we're getting 90 degrees. They have made him far too jacked to get him to go anywhere near a full flex. We do not have a forearm swivel on him, as they've made Wolverine sufficiently tiny. We know that the old canonical head is one of the shortest X-Men out there, and they've made it very obvious with this figure. He is a very short figure, and he will actually go in great with your display. I do love the detail that they did with that, where they made sure that he is going to be one of your smaller figures. As for his claws, they're alright. I'm not going to tell you that these are some of the best claws that I've seen. They're a little bit wobbly on my particular figure. These are the ones that come out with a little bit of a tug, so that you can display them how you so please. One on each side of someone's neck with the third one missing, him flipping the bird using the claws. You get the picture. Now these go back in relatively easily, just as they pop out relatively easily. So that is something you're going to want to be on the lookout for with your display, is making sure that these claws don't get lost. Now, for our waist, how are we doing with our ab crunches? Wow, Wolverine can do a good crunch. That's actually very impressive. He's got some of the best articulation I've seen in a while, and backwards, he's okay. I'm not going to say he's wonderful going back, but he's alright. We once again have the waist swivel. And for our hips, we've got a decent amount of articulation. He can go decently wide, can almost do the splits fully. That's fairly impressive. He once again has the thigh cuts very high up on his thigh, to make it so that you've got a good range of motion there. And again, it really doesn't stand out in his costume. For what we've got for his knees, they are the double jointed knees, but again, that's as far as you're getting it to go back. You're not getting it to go supremely far back, mostly because of the design of his boots and the thickness of his thighs and ankles. As for his boots, we do have a boot swivel. We do, so that's going to make some very dynamic poses available to you. As for his ankles, we once again have the rocker ankle. Going forward, we don't have a great forward range of motion. That disappoints me a bit, because I would love to have Wolverine in a great lunging pose at someone. It's what he does. Well, he's the best there is at what he does. However, he does go almost completely on point to make for great backward ankle articulation here. So if you've got the Colossus figure that came out a few waves ago with the Warlock wave, you can do a decent cannonball special, or fastball special, however you want to put it, with this figure. Especially due to his diminutive size, he would go very well with that posing. Wolverine does come with an extra set of hands. They are closed fists without the claws. Now, I will say this about the inclusion of these extra hands. Why? Honestly, why? You gave us closed fists with the claws. You can easily pop the claws out to have the claws, or the closed fists with no claws. That's an easy enough thing to do. If you're going to give us a set of clawless fists, or clawless hands for that matter, don't make them be the same exact things just without the points for the claws. Make them open hands. Make them anything beyond just more closed fists. After all, the difference between these hands and these hands is some pegs. With that being said, I love the likeness of this figure. He looks fantastic. That face came straight out of the 90s cartoon and straight out of my childhood. That is a wonderful representation of Jim Lee's work. And if my camera would be so kind as to focus on him instead of on me. And obviously you're not going to do that. Wonderful. Well, that makes me look silly. Anyway. Technology, folks. It is a wonderful representation that looks like something out of the 90s Saturday morning cartoon. If you were a big fan of that, like I was, then you're going to love this figure. It goes really well with the 90s Jim Lee version Cyclops that they did in the Warlock wave. They've been doing a lot more 90s figures, and I'm kind of loving it. But I'm a big fan of X-Men from the 90s, so what have you. I would recommend this figure, and I'm actually going to keep him out just so that I can show you his comparative size later on to another figure that is very relevant to him. In the meantime, let us move on to our first female figure of the wave, Psylocke. Now, for those of you not in the know, there are two versions of this Psylocke running around. There's the black hair with the lighter bodysuit, or there's this version with the purple hair and the darker bodysuit. It was a running change made to the figure. I'm not sure which one is the rare one at this point. I know that there's someone out there that will happily tell you, but it's not going to be me. The original version was the black hair one. The running change one is the purple hair one. I will say that. That being said, I personally prefer the purple hair. It's more comic accurate. The packaging once again has the panel on the front and the blurb on the back. Inside the packaging, we have Psylocke, a good number of accessories, and Apocalypse's left foot. We'll take that out for later on. Now, she does come with 4 accessories. Now, I know it looks like it's only 3, but it is actually 4, and I'll explain why in a moment. After we get her, thankfully, out of this packaging. Now, if you were here for last review, you saw the Typhoid Mary figure. Now, the Typhoid Mary figure was a fun figure if you're a fan of the character. Otherwise, it's only so-so. But you'll notice that this piece is actually a reuse from the Typhoid Mary figure, as it is the exact same katana as seen in the Deadpool katanas and the same flame effect we had for Typhoid Mary. So, we've got the Psy Katana, but we also have that flame effect that wraps around said Psy Katana, making it so it can be displayed either way. Now, the other 2 accessories that she comes with are ones that are very unique to Psylocke, and I'm very happy that they went out on a limb and made these pieces. The first is the Psy Dagger that she uses with her hand. We'll show you that. And the Psychic Butterfly. For fans of the character Psylocke, you'll remember the Psychic Butterfly usually appears when she's using her powers, and can even go over people that she's using her powers on. So I'm very happy that they included this as a piece. Let's see what we've got for the figure. And we'll try her out with some of the accessories. For the figure herself, the belt here isn't attached to anything, so it's just kind of loose. She has, for shoulder articulation, she can go just above 90 degrees, making for some decent articulation there. For her elbows, we do not have any kind of bicep swivel, which is a bit of a disappointment, especially for a fighter character such as Psylocke. For her elbows, we've only got single joints, but amazingly, her single joint seems to go better than Wolverine's double joint, which is a little bit funny to me. I'd love for some double jointed female figures, Hasbro, but this one is decent. It's got a little bit better than 90 degrees. She can get a decent amount of range there. Because of the lack of bicep swivel, she does have swivel in her elbow, which just looks a little awkward and painful if you're going to be honest. She does have the wrist swivel once again, which only goes in and... that is a very tight joint, but it goes in and out as we've seen in previous figures. It is not one of the up and down ones, even though she wields a sword. I thought about doing some of the accessories now, but we'll get to those after we examine the rest of her articulation. For her ab articulation, she only has an ab swivel, not an ab crunch. Going forward, that's as far forward as you're getting her. This is as much articulation as you're going to be getting. Going back, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, she is not as flexible as she seems to be. This being said, she does have a little bit of the side-to-side flexibility, but not even so much in that area. That's about as much as you're getting out of her. That's slightly disappointing for a British woman who's overtaken the mind of a ninja and uses psychic powers to fight with ninjutsu psychically. Just saying. Her hip articulation only goes to here. I expected more out of Psylocke. I really did. For her thigh articulation, we do have a thigh swivel here. We do have the double jointed knees, which she can get a great deal of motion out of. She actually goes almost all the way back. Her thighs are a little too thick to make it so that she goes all the way back, but it's decent. We do not have a boot cut at all, so all of your articulation for that is going to be coming solely from the thigh, meaning you're going to be lacking a little bit in your articulation and dynamic posing. She has rocker ankles once again, making it so that her ankles go in and out as such. Her forward range of motion on her ankle is actually to a very unnatural degree. That looks fantastic. She can point her toes almost to her nose, and that's great. That can make for some wonderful lunging attacks, and she can go almost on point going back. Once again, she is not wearing heels. Thank you, Hasbro, for hearing the people and knowing, as great as heels might look, they're hell for people that are trying to pose. They are not pleasant. It makes it so that my shelves are always falling over. For her head articulation, the only thing that you're getting is that much backwards. That's it, because of her luscious long hair. And going forward, she's got a decent range of motion looking down. But looking up, her hair greatly impedes that. Makes it so that is as far back as you can get. Pretty much just looking straight on. Her hair is a softer rubber, making it so that it's not a hard rubber and you're not feeling like you're going to be breaking it as you're doing posing, but it's still going to impede a bit on the posing. Now that we've reviewed what she looks like as far as articulation, she's coming with some of the most accessories in this line, so let's see exactly what she looks like with them on. Her blade for her psychic blade. It looks actually really good. It makes for a wonderful effect piece. I'm really happy with what they did with this. Her psychic katana piece is also a relatively nice piece. It looks great in hand for her and really adds to the character. And finally, the one that I know most people are going to display her with, oh, that actually rather makes it. I'm rather happy with this. I'm rather happy with this. For an altogether look, Psylocke actually looks pretty much like she does in the comics, using her powers when combining all of the effect pieces they gave her. I'm really happy that Hasbro is starting to give us accessories like effect pieces. Some of the import companies have been giving them to us for a while, but these really make the Psylocke figure shine, and I'm very happy with what they did. I hope they continue to give us pieces like these. This Psylocke, I'm suitably impressed. I'm suitably impressed with this figure. She's got great accessories. She's a little bit limited in her articulation. I do hope that gets fixed at some point in the future, because I'd love to see more articulated female figures. But as far as this one goes, she will be replacing my ToyBiz Psylocke. I cannot speak today. Due to her sculpt looking so much nicer, and her articulation being pretty decent. Plus, the fact that she included literally any accessories whatsoever. Something that I wish I could say for the Psylocke version from ToyBiz that I cannot. They didn't give her anything, much less a psychic dagger, a psychic katana, and the psychic butterfly. So I'm very happy that we got those included in. If you're a fan of Psylocke or a fan of the 90s X-Men, I would recommend this figure to you. It's actually really nice. It's a lot nicer than I anticipated. Up next, I had a different one in mind for the next figure, but I'm going to go with one to show the comparison with the Wolverine figure first. The next figure we have on the docket is Sabretooth, the longtime rival of Wolverine, and the first time in a very long time that we've gotten a classic comic look at Sabretooth. He once again has the window pane front and the blurb on the back. Inside of the box, we're looking like we don't have a lot of accessories, much like with Gladiator, but we do have Sabretooth, so you take what you can get. Inside of the box, Sabretooth comes with the Arm of Apocalypse, which we will take out for later on. And that's it, once again. Sabretooth doesn't have a ton of accessories, just like Gladiator didn't. But just from looking at Sabretooth here, I can almost tell that he is once again on the Hyperion buck. That being said, he has a little bit more heft in hand than Gladiator did. We definitely have the Hyperion buck going once again. He has the two pegs in his back, much like Venom and Gladiator before him. That piece keeps in the fur bits here, which are made up of a softer rubber. For his shoulder articulation, we're not actually getting as much as we got out of Gladiator. So we're only limited to about 90 degrees. The head articulation can go all the way back, which is wonderful for those great lunging poses to be done, and can go all the way down. So he can also be on top of a mountaintop, looking down and stalking Wolverine. He's got a great deal of articulation there, and I'm very happy with the job they did with his sculpt. If you look closely at his face, at that face that only a mother could love, it's wonderfully done. The fangs are really prominent in it. He looks very feral, and I'm very happy with the job they did. He once again has bicep swivels here, and a double jointed elbow. However, much like Wolverine before him, that's as far as you're getting that double jointed elbow to go. He can't really flex because they just put too much work into his forearms. His biceps aren't even that large, but this man has forearms like you wouldn't believe. They did do some good sculpting with the forearm spikes here, which are made of a softer plastic than the rest of it, but it's integrated very well. They don't seem like they're going to be popping off anytime soon, but yeah, that's actually very well done. His hands in the open claws have the sharpened fingertips, as you can see here. He has the articulation just as a wrist swivel, and the standard in and out for his wrists. And I'm realizing that we've got that music on a little bit too loud. For his ab crunch, going forward, he can actually do a decent distance forward. And going back, we're going very well. That's actually some of the best backwards motion we've seen today. That impresses me. He once again has the hip swivel for that. His hip articulation actually is wider than that of any of the previous figures. I'm very happy with this. We once again have the thigh swivel up here for a dynamic range of motion. The double hinged knee, which can only go to about there. It's less than 120 degrees rather. It's not going to be fully there because of the sculpting rather, not the articulation, but the sculpting in his thigh and his calf. Speaking of his calves, we do once again have the boot cut for any and all articulation there. For his feet, we have the rocker ankles going back and forth to a decent degree. Going forward, he actually has a better range of forward motion than we saw with Wolverine. Meaning he's going to be the one doing the lunging. Wolverine will be the one standing there, maybe going into a berserker rage. As for going back, he can go almost all the way on point. Once again, greatly impressing me with just the kind of work they've been putting into their figures now. Now, I said I was going to do a size comparison of two figures, and yes, you guessed which ones they were already. This is your new Sabretooth, and this is your new Wolverine. Sabretooth is significantly larger than Wolverine, and it looks fantastic for that great Saturday morning cartoon rivalry that we all grew up with in the 90s, or at least I know I did. I love how they've done this size disparity between the two of them. The Sabretooth is clearly a much larger figure, and it looks fantastic when put next to the much smaller Wolverine. Some great posing can be done with these. And I suppose that the reason why they didn't give Wolverine any open hands is so that he can have his hands caught by a Sabretooth. Not just in the catching hands sort of way, but you can put his wrists and hands into the open claws of Sabretooth, making for some great power struggle posing between the two of them. I'm very pleased with this Sabretooth figure. It does a great representation of his classic comic book costume, and really, again, makes me think of the 90s television show where they had their biggest rivalry, or at least the one most known to most of us. I would recommend the two figures, especially if you get them together. The next figure on the docket is the Mistress of the Elements, Storm. This version of Storm is... It depends on how you're looking at her. She can either be the classic Mohawk Storm or the modern Mohawk Storm. Once again, comes with the window frame front and the blurb on the back. Now, for me personally, I think of this more as the classic first appearance Storm with her Mohawk. Not so much the new version of her with the Mohawk, as that one uses, for the most part, her traditional X-Men costume. Inside the box, we've got two effect pieces, one of which decided to jump out at me. The main body of Apocalypse and Storm herself. Now, since we've had some of the pieces for Apocalypse out already, might as well get started with putting him together for our big final review of the day. For this figure of Storm, she only comes with the main body of Apocalypse and the two effect pieces, but that's more than we've gotten for her previously, so I'm already pretty pleased. I'm decently pleased with that as well at the moment. Let's go over Storm's figure first. Now, I will warn you, coming out of the packaging, she already has the same issue that many figures like her do. She was posed in the packaging, which means that she has a very bent leg here. As you can clearly see, this is her knee. That's going to take some boiling water and or a hairdryer to straighten out. But we'll get to that in a moment. For her neck articulation. Wow! Color me impressed. That is some wonderful range of motion out of the back of her neck. And she can look completely downwards. I'm very impressed with this. Her Mohawk, on mine at least, if you look carefully, is actually partially coming out. So I would be careful with that and be aware while you're looking for quality control. Her leather jacket seems to be of the very soft rubber variety. So it shouldn't be impeding too much on our articulation, but let's see. For our shoulder articulation, we are only getting the 90 degrees, no more. We once again only have the single jointed elbow, and these only go 90 degrees as well. We do have the elbow swivel because she is a female figure, and Hasbro refuses to give us bicep swivels and double jointed elbows for our female figures. I don't know why. I don't know why Hasbro doesn't listen to fans with this. We're all clamoring for it, and it would make your female figures much, much better. For the hands, we once again have the wrist swivel. And her hands go inward and back once again. The pieces for her glove bits aren't glued on in any way, so they're just rather loose on her hands, which makes them sit a little bit odd for me. That being said, it's not bad. I wish her arm articulation was a little bit better, but this is what we've got. For her waist, she only has a waist swivel, once again just like Psylocke, so that is as far forward as she's going, and she actually has far more back range than even Psylocke did. So I'm fairly impressed with that, even with the leather jacket on. For her side-to-side swivel, that's all you're getting out of it. It's not a whole lot. Her twin belts here aren't attached to anything either, so just like with Psylocke's sash and with the wrist pieces here, it just kind of goes as it wishes. For our hip wow! 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 For Storm's hip articulation, she can almost do a complete set of splits. That's some of the best hip articulation we've seen. And much better than other characters who wear jeans like Typhoid Mary and even Jessica Jones. We once again have the thigh swivel here. For articulation, the double jointed knees, which even with this knee being a little gummed up due to the way they posed her, still has a decent amount of range. She can almost get all the way back. Color me impressed with that. That is some great range of motion. Now, since she has boots on, I could only assume, and be incorrect in my assumption, she does not have a boot cut. There is no boot swivel here. It seems like a massive lost opportunity. If you're going to be using a different piece for her legs, or for her boots here, why not articulate it? For her ankles, we once again have the rocker ankles, but we also once again have something showing up that no one, and I mean no one, wants to see. I'll get to that in a moment. Going forward, she's got a decent range, and going back, she's not quite on point, but she's got a decent range there too. The thing we don't want to see is high heels again. High heels make posing a figure, especially one with a bent up knee like this, a real pain. I don't know why high heels are insisted on for so many of the female characters, but at least we've got several that don't have them, so that's an improvement. We'll go with an improvement. As for her... I cannot speak today. How her effect pieces sit... The effect pieces are not solid pieces as I thought they would be. They're actually very soft rubber. That surprises me somewhat. That being said, they sit very well on her hands, and they make for some wonderful pieces for a display showing off her powers. If I can get it to stay on, which is the only problem with it being made of such gummy plastic. The effect pieces, which are a translucent yellow, I'm not sure if that really translates here on the camera, they look fantastic on her. They look great. As for effect pieces, they're a little gummy for my liking. They fall off just like that. I mean, they are very, very loosely on here. That being said, they make for a very cool effect if you're attempting to display her in a battle pose. Now, we don't normally get Storm with effect pieces, which seems like an oversight for previous releases of the figure, but even with them being a gummier plastic, I'm happy that we got anything at all. It being the first time that we've been given any kind of effect pieces with Storm. Yes, I am still indeed on. And still reviewing. Even though the effect pieces are gummy for Storm, I am very happy that we've got these pieces for Storm, as it's one of the very few times we've ever seen any kind of effect piece to go along with any Storm, much less her original costume. So I'm happy with the figure. I'm happy. It'll make for some great effect pieces, and worst comes to worst, even if you're not the biggest fan of the original costume of Storm, if you've got an older release of her, like the original Hasbro version, which I may or may not have, I do, then those effect pieces would go great on that version if you're doing a 90s X-Men display. As she did not come with any effect pieces, and these would definitely greatly improve the character. All in all, I'm fairly happy with her and think that it's a good design that they did. Now, I can't decide which of these two I'm more excited for, so I'll do the one that I'm pretty excited for. Mostly because I'm a big fan of the character. Our next figure on the docket is the Multiple Man James Madrox. As you can see, it's not quite his classic costume, but it's not quite his modern one either. It's sort of an in-between of the two. Once again, it's got the window pane on the front, the blurb on the back, and when I said earlier that I had 7 unique figures, that is for a reason. It is going to be one of the very few times that I'm ever going to recommend something, depending on how this very review goes. Inside the box, we have Multiple Man, 2 extra heads, and the right leg of Apocalypse. We'll take out that right leg of Apocalypse and pop it on for our final figure review of the day. Once we get done with this figure and our next one. After that, we've got Multiple Man. Multiple Man is... he's a fan favorite of mine. I'm a big fan of him, most especially from the Age of Apocalypse universe. He's a very unique character, and I very much enjoy him, but that's just me. Inside the box, we've got the 2 extra heads, the unmasked James Madrox head, and the non-smiling head, which does have a wee bit of a smirk, versus the more grimacing head that comes on him stock. His articulation is going to be partially impeded because he's got the leather jacket on. For his arms, ooh, swing and a miss. We're not even getting the 90 degrees for the shoulders. That's as far up as we're going here. We do have the bicep swivels, and we only have single jointed elbows for him. Which only go to 90 degrees. We do have the wrist swivel, and the slight back and forth motion of the wrist we've got here. He is lacking in articulation when it comes to his arms, but that's mostly due to him having the jacket body. I really hope that since they have announced they're going to be doing a Gambit figure, that they change up this body somewhat, because we want him to have arm articulation. Now, fans of Marvel Legends will recognize the coat. It is the exact same coat as the Nick Fury coat. Now, mind you, it is a much thinner more flexible rubber than the Nick Fury coat was, but it is the same mold used. For his head articulation, he can actually go all the way back and all the way forward. I'm very happy with the head articulation we've been seeing so far today, minus Psylocke's. For our ab crunch, James, he can go decently forward, but not 100%. And going back, of course, his coat is also impeding on this, but that's all that you're getting out of him. It's barely even half a click back. We do once again have the thigh swivel here, which is hard to see with his coat. I'm sorry, the hip swivel for his thigh articulation. Hip articulation. I cannot speak today. Clearly, I'm off. That's as far as we're getting for his hips. No more than that. I suppose that works. It's not a preference for me, but I do suppose it works. We once again do have a thigh swivel as well. At the upper thighs. He's got the double jointed knees. He can't go more than this backward, as he once again has too much going on in the calf department to make that happen. Now, we do have a boot swivel with him, something that we haven't seen with all of the other figures so far today. Only a select few have had the boot swivel so far. For his ankles, we've got a outward and inward motion. That's actually some of the best I've seen. Going forward, though, that is all the action you're getting out of his forward-facing ankle. Going back, he can go almost on point, so that's wonderful. He's a solid enough figure. I can't really say anything negative about him. If you're a big fan of the character, of course, then part of the reason why he comes with the multiple heads is for army building purposes. He is multiple man after all. So, if you're anything at all like me, then you'd probably like to have a multiple man unmasked in front of another couple multiple men with the masks on. For my display, that's how it's going to be. I'd prefer about 5 multiple men altogether in a V-shaped pattern. But as it is, he's an alright figure. I'm not going to say I love him nearly as much as I hoped I was going to. Although, I will admit, now that I see the smirking head on him, I actually rather prefer this head. If we can zoom in on him instead of on me. And of course, we're not going to zoom in. His head with the slight smirk to it actually looks much better than the stock scowling, snarling head that they give him. I much prefer this head. It's more in character with James Madrox. If you're a big fan of the character, like I am, then of course you're going to have multiples of multiple men. But if you're not, if you're a big fan of the 90s show or the Age of Apocalypse storyline, then I suggest him. But I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that he's a must-have figure unless you're a big fan of the character. I was hoping he was going to actually be a little bit better than that. I am a big fan of multiple men, so I was hoping for a absolutely fantastic figure. But his figure is, it's alright. We'll call it passable. Possibly with a more traditional 90s classic costume, he might be a little bit better, but as it stands, he's not awful. The last figure for us to unbox today, before we do our official review of the Apocalypse Build-A-Figure, is Magneto. Magneto, as you all know from the comic books, from the video games, from the movies, from anything involving the X-Men whatsoever. He is one of their main antagonists, the head of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. This is in a different, more modern outfit of his. I know people were clamoring for the classic red and purple, but that being said, I'm sure with this mold being done, they will do a re-release of the figure in the classic red and purple later on down the line for the fans of the 90s cartoon. Inside the box, he's actually got some of the most accessories seen in this wave, with the right arm of Apocalypse, an unmasked an unmasked Eric Leshner head, a set of effect pieces here to give you that magnetic look, a set of closed fists, and a set of open hands that are a clear, translucent purple to give the effect that he is using his power. We'll go over those in one moment as I finish putting together our final figure for our final review of the day, who looks rather impressive. He's not quite the size of the old one, but we'll go over all that in a moment. Now, getting old Eric Leshner out of the packaging is a feat in and of itself, apparently, because they've packaged him rather well. Now, I guarantee they didn't make this Magneto head just to use it one time and never look at it again. We will get a re-release of this, I am almost positive. That's a very interesting thing. I will go over that momentarily. Here we have the figure in hand for Magneto. For his helmet, I will actually do the two... Actually, I won't be doing the two heads separately, as it looks like Eric Leshner's hair would be imposing on his backwards articulation, much like his helmet is. This is as far up as he's going to look. Looking down, he can actually look down at people, which is something you would expect Eric Leshner to do. The interesting thing to note is about the cape here. This isn't it sitting oddly. This is actually how it's meant to be done. If you can see, there's actually a post keeping the cape from laying directly on his back to make it always look as though it's got a extra bit of flow to it, keeping it off of his body. It's very unique. It's something we haven't seen before, not even today in the Gladiator that we did. For his shoulders, at least they're not attached to his helmet, Ronin. For those of you that tuned in to my stream 2 weeks ago on Caffeine and saw the unboxing of the MCU figures, you would know what I'm talking about. For his arm articulation, we're getting just above 90 degrees, nothing spectacular. He does have the bicep swivels once again. A double jointed elbow, not that that matters with these giant gauntlets that he has, making it so that it's articulation that you can't even use. That's as far as it's going. Using the double jointed elbow to every bit of it, that's as far as you're getting it because of his gauntlet design. It is impeding on his articulation there. Amazingly, even though he has the gauntlets on, we do not have a forearm swivel. We do have a wrist swivel, however. with the forward and back motion of the wrist. Now, keep in mind, the backward motion of the wrist is greatly limited, as you can see here, because of, once again, the gauntlet design on him. He can only go so far back. That being said, he's Magneto. I'm not sure how many dynamic poses you're trying to get a Holocaust survivor in, as much as you're trying to get him to fly and be a menacing force against the X-Men, usually holding something metal in his hand or in the air around him, flinging it down at them, or even using it with a flight stand with Wolverine, like he did when he removed all of the metal from Wolverine's skeleton. For his ab crunch, we've got a decent amount going forward. Not quite as much as we saw even with Sabretooth. And going back, we've got a slight amount. He once again has the hip swivel here. As for his actual hip articulation, that's as much as you're getting out of him. Unfortunately, we have not seen that great of hip articulation from anyone except for Storm in this wave. He once again has the thigh cut here for the thigh swivel on the upper thigh. This is as far as you're getting with his double jointed knee. And it does look like he does have a boot swivel to him. Which is rather nice for doing posing with him. As for his ankle articulation, we actually have a great deal of motion going inward to a painful degree, along with going outward as well. That's very impressive. As is his forward ankle motion. That's actually some of the most impressive motion that we've seen today. Going down, we once again have him going almost on point. That's very impressive to me. They did a great job detailing, tooling this figure as far as his articulation goes for his legs. His arms could have used a little bit more, but for what we've got, I'm not upset with it. Switching out the heads so that we can see what our unmasked Eric Leshner head looks like. I'm actually a big fan of what Magneto looks like unmasked here. It's a wonderful design, and it really captures the character very well. It's got a very serious look to it, while having a wonderful head sculpt. I'm rather impressed with what they did. His effect pieces look to be, and they are literally the exact same effect pieces we saw earlier today with Storm's figure. It's a little bit funny that the first time they put out these effect pieces, they do them twice in the same wave. That's a little funny to me. Now, the effect pieces, they look nice. That being said, I don't know of any magnets that really put off purple effects. I might reuse these for other figures and just have some effects being held up around him for metal pieces. But they were a very nice inclusion. Switching out his hands. For his non-effect hands, you can see the difference between the two, where this one is that very translucent plastic, and this one is more so the solid plastic that we're used to. Well, switching out his hands. I'm actually not 100% sure which one I prefer more. If it's his closed fist hand here, or his open fist, more controlling hand here. I wish that they included maybe just one more set of hands, an open set of the black ones, and not just an open set of the purple ones. That being said, I might go through some of my other figures and see if I've got any black hands that would work for him. Because the purple, again, it's a wonderful effect to have, but I'm not 100% sure it's necessary for Magneto, as I don't know of any magnets that go purple when you're using them. Maybe I'm just using different magnets than you guys. As it stands, it's a good figure. I'm not going to tell you it's a great figure. I'm positive they will re-release this figure later on as the classic version, but as it stands, I'm not really going to say that this is a figure for someone to pick up unless you're desperate to get your hands on Magneto, or unless you really, really enjoy this costume. The unmasked head is a fantastic thing, and it does make for a great figure piece, but I'm not 100% sure if I would really recommend this one amongst the inevitable re-releases that will come out down the way. Hopefully not as recent as we've seen some re-releases like Wolverine, who gets one pretty much every X-Men wave. It's not a bad figure. It's not. And don't think that I'm saying incredibly negative things about him. I'm not. I rather like him. I do wish he was in his classic costume, but I do think that it's a good figure of Magneto as it stands. I like him enough, but I can't say that I love the figure. He will probably replace my current Magneto in my display, as, I'm not going to lie to you, the last Magneto that I displayed is from X-Men, the original movie. It's the original Ian McKellen Magneto. So this one will be replacing that in my display, but for how long is the main question. Now, on to the main event. The thing that you all want to see, the thing that everyone comes to these for, the Build-A-Figure. This wave's Build-A-Figure was Apocalypse. The last time we saw Apocalypse get a Build-A-Figure was the second wave ever of Marvel Legends, or the second Build-A-Figure wave of Marvel Legends, rather, back in the Hasbro days. This figure is not nearly as big as those, but he does have a certain charm to him. Ladies and gentlemen, your new Apocalypse figure. He's alright in size. I'm not going to tell you he's nearly as large as I would like an Apocalypse figure to be. His neck articulation, he can look down on people, but in the silliest of way, where you don't see his head anymore as he does so. He actually completely covers his mouth with this collar piece when he looks down. Additionally, he can only look this far up because of that collar piece. His shoulder pieces are attached at the trapezius muscle there, making it so that those can only go so high, and they are not of a gummier plastic. They're actually of a very hard plastic. That being said, he does still get the 90-degree motion that we're looking for there. He does have a bicep swivel, but only single-jointed elbows, of which can only go this far. Mainly because of his gauntlet design, which is, again, a hard plastic, keeping him from bending his arm any further. The good thing about him being a Build-A-Figure is if the arm comes out, I don't scream. Anyway. For his wrist articulation, we really only get a swivel out of him. because of the design of his gauntlet, that's as far in as his hand is going. And that is as far out as his hand is going. That's it. You're not getting a lot of articulation there. You're getting some nice detailing, and the freshly made gauntlets are fantastic, along with the freshly made shoulder pieces and the freshly made collar piece. They are all wonderful pieces to it, with great detail work, including the rivets, if you can see them here, that go along his shoulder pads. That being said, he seems a little bit stiff. For his ab crunch, he does go this far forward and this far back. That's actually rather impressive backward motion for him. On his hips, he does have a hip swivel if you can get it to work, because his belt impedes that articulation. For his actual hip articulation, wow! That says something when the best hip articulation, other than Storm, comes from the Build-A-Figure. That's impressive, but I'm not sure if it's for all the right reasons. We once again do have the thigh swivel here, and the double jointed knees as seen here. That's as far back as you're going. Let's see if we can get this tendril of his out of the way, that cable there. That's as far back as you're going because of the design of the boots and just how thick his calves and thighs are. As for his boots, he does not have a boot swivel of any sort, but he does have the rocker ankles that we are used to seeing now, with some decent articulation there. Going forward, even if it's a little bit locked up, he only goes a little bit forward with his articulation. Going backward, trying to make sure his locked joint here doesn't go snapping on me. That's as far backward as we're getting him. He's not one of the best articulated that we've seen, but he's got some nice detail work. Honestly, for a Build-A-Figure, he is not one of my favorites, I have to say. He looks alright. But comparing him in size, most especially to the original Build-A-Figure of him, where his torso was bigger than he is in his entirety now, he's a little bit of a disappointment to me. He's not horrible by any stretch of the means. By any stretch of the words, he is not horrible. But I'm not going to say he's one of my favorite figures. He just seems very stiff, and his size is only so large. If we were to put him next to Gladiator from earlier, he's only slightly larger. Making sure that they've got even footing here. Yes, actually, Gladiator's mohawk comes right up to about the chin of Apocalypse. Now, Apocalypse is often seen as being able to change his sizes, his shapes, and pretty much anything he feels like. That's what happens when you're the very first mutant. You get to define what your powers are, and just define them very poorly. I can do whatever I want to, because I feel like it. Because I'm the first one. Thank you very much for that, Apocalypse. Whose powers differ greatly than they did in the X-Men Apocalypse movie. That being said, he's an alright figure. If you did not get the original Hasbro figure of Apocalypse, either the Build-A-Figure one or the single-pack one, this one is slightly larger than the single-pack Apocalypse, but definitely smaller than the other Build-to-Figure Apocalypse. Let's see how many times we can say Apocalypse in one setting. All in all, the wave was okay. I'm not going to tell you it was my favorite wave. If I did, I would honestly be lying to you. He's alright. He's not my personal favorite. There are some good designs in the figure, but honestly, none that I can say I wanted to write home about. If I'm speaking honestly about it, the figure was alright. I'm not super happy with him, but I'm not incredibly disappointed either. The wave in total, we got some figures we've been dying for. We did get the 90s era Wolverine. We did get the 90s era Sabretooth. We got the original appearance Storm, who is great. We got a Psylocke with a bunch of accessories, which I'm super happy about. We got Gladiator, which is nice to have him without paying $50+ for the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive one that came out during the Thanos initiative. And we got a Multiple Man, who's an alright figure. He's not my ideal Multiple Man, but he's not bad. In all, if you're a big X-Men collector, you'll enjoy the wave. If you're not, then I would say to look more so for the next wave that we will be doing an unboxing of next week. I am looking for fan comments on this. Let me know what you're looking more so forward to. We've got the Sauron wave just sitting here waiting to be unboxed, and from what I've heard, the Sauron Build-to-Figure is the best one that's been seen in ages. Probably the best Build-to-Figure they've ever made. And that has me very excited. We also have a unofficial wave, which might be completed by next week, with the Fantastic Four Walgreens exclusive figures, which I have all of at this point except for Ben Grimm, but fingers crossed about us getting a Ben Grimm before next week, where we can do that as an unofficial official wave with no Build-to-Figure. We also have the Netflix figures. Now, I know that they came out with the Man-Thing wave, but of course I did not do a review of the Man-Thing wave, 1, and 2, I did just receive my 2-pack of the Luke Cage and Claire, I'm trying to remember Claire's last name, but I can't right now, Temple, that's it. I did just receive my 2-pack of Luke Cage and Claire Temple from the Netflix series there, meaning that if you add together all of the Netflix figures that there are of Luke, Claire, Jessica, Elektra, Daredevil, and the Punisher, that makes almost a unique wave just of Netflix figures. I would love to find myself a Colleen Wing and or a Danny Rand, but I will wait until they get re-released, not with the San Diego Comic-Con SDCC exclusive box set that just came out. In the meantime, let me know if you guys are excited about the upcoming review of the Sauron wave, which will most likely be the wave we do next week. Let us know on our Twitter. You can find me at Vamp Preacher on Twitter, or let RetroVixen, my cohort here, know on her Twitter, and she will let me know. You can also follow RetroVixen, as you can see in the comments, at RetroVixen, Retro_Vixen, of course, here on Twitch, at Retro Space Vixen, Retro, the words Retro Space and Vixen on Twitter. She will probably be streaming a game later on today. I'm not entirely sure of what it'll be. I'm thinking it's going to be Dead Rising, because she's gotten some requests for that. So make sure you tune into her channel later on to see exactly what she's got going on there. In the meantime, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. Thank you so much for tuning in and seeing the review. Thank you for the follow earlier today. I didn't even get to catch your name, that was so quick. But Join us next week for the Sauron Wave unboxing. Unless you want to see something else, we do have more than our fair share of older figures which have not been reviewed here. If I'm being honest, I think I have somewhere around the 700 range now of Marvel Legends that can be reviewed. I have a problem, and that's the first step to getting past it, is admitting it. I'm not going to stop having the problem, but I know I have a problem. Thank you so much for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen. Let us know what you're looking forward to on the Twitter, or even message me here. In the meantime, have a great one, keep it nerdy, and join Retro Vixen later on.